The morning Evelyn Hook was told to leave, it wasn't raining. There was no dramatic storm to match the moment, just a pale Arizona sky, a garbage bag of her belongings sitting on the front porch, and her sister's voice through a cracked door saying they couldn't keep carrying someone who couldn't carry herself. No shouting, no tears from anyone but her. Just the quiet, clinical cruelty of people who had decided she was no longer worth the inconvenience. She sat on the porch step for 20 minutes before she stood up. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have money. She had a garbage bag, a phone with a cracked screen, and somewhere deep underneath all that shame, something that hadn't quite died yet. She just didn't know it. And she had no idea that 11 miles across the city, someone who once sat next to her in 7th grade English class was about to walk back into her life. George Parker did not enjoy charity galas. He'd attended enough of them over the years to know the pattern by heart. Rented ballrooms dressed up in soft lighting and flower arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Men in tuxedos discussing philanthropy between bites of food they wouldn't finish. Women with careful smiles talking about causes they'd forget by morning. He went because his publicist told him he had to. He smiled when he needed to. He wrote checks when it made sense. But the moment he could disappear, he did. Tonight he'd slipped out early, trading the ballroom for the hotel bar 2 floors down, where the lighting was worse and nobody cared who he was. He loosened his tie, ordered a club soda, and spent 10 minutes just staring at the wood grain of the bar top, like it held some answer he'd been trying to find all week. He was in Phoenix on business. 3 days of meetings about a commercial development project in the Midtown quarter that he'd been negotiating for the better part of 6 months. The deal was close. His team was sharp. Everything was moving exactly the way it was supposed to. So why did he feel like something was slightly, persistently wrong? He chalked it up to exhaustion. 40 years old, and he still hadn't figured out how to rest properly. His therapist had mentioned it twice in their last session. His assistant mentioned it every time she booked his flights. Even his housekeeper in Denver had quietly started leaving herbal tea on his desk instead of coffee, which he thought was either sweet or passive-aggressive and hadn't decided which. He was halfway through mentally drafting an apology email to his therapist when the woman at the end of the bar caught his attention. Not in the way a person usually catches your attention in a hotel bar at 10 o'clock at night. Not because she was dressed up or trying to be noticed. Quite the opposite. She was sitting very still, both hands wrapped around a glass of water, staring at nothing in particular. Her jacket was thin for the October air and slightly too big for her frame, the kind of clothing that suggested it had been chosen for warmth rather than fit. Her hair was pulled back simply, no jewelry, no phone out. She just sat there like someone who had nowhere better to be and wasn't sure that was a temporary situation. George looked away. However, I then looked back. There was something about the angle of her jaw, the way she held herself even while looking exhausted, a certain straightness in the spine that felt familiar in a way he couldn't immediately name. He ordered another club soda, told himself to stop staring. Then she turned her head slightly to ask the bartender for a refill on the water, and George felt the recognition hit him somewhere behind the sternum. Evelyn Hook. He hadn't said that name out loud in probably 15 years, maybe more, but it came back with startling clarity, the way certain memories do when they're attached to something that actually mattered. 7th grade English, Mrs. Calloway's class, 2nd row from the window, Evelyn Hook, who read faster than anyone in the room and wasn't shy about it, who corrected the teacher once about a quote attribution and was right, who used to share her lunch with him on the days he came to school without one, which was more days than he'd ever admitted to anyone. He sat with the recognition for a moment, unsure what to do with it. Then he picked up his club soda and walked to the end of the bar. Evelyn. She turned. Her eyes moved over his face with the careful blankness of someone who learned to be cautious about strangers in unfamiliar places. Then something shifted, a slow, uncertain recognition working its way through. George, she said. Not a question exactly. More like she was testing the word to see if it held. Yeah, he said. George Parker, Mrs. Calloway's class. She blinked, then let out a breath that was almost a laugh but didn't quite make it all the way there. Yeah, I know who you are, George. He gestured to the stool beside her. Can I sit? She looked at the stool like she was genuinely considering the question. It's a free country. He sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke, which somehow wasn't as awkward as it probably should have been. You look different, she said finally. 23 years will do that. You look expensive, she clarified, glancing at his watch with a small dry smile. That's what I meant. He laughed. It surprised him. A real one, not the polished social version. Fair enough. She turned back to her water. The smile faded. What are you doing in Phoenix? He asked. A pause. I live here. Another pause, shorter. Or I did. It's complicated. He didn't push. He'd learned over the years that the fastest way to get people to close down was to ask the follow-up question too soon. So he just nodded and let the silence sit there between them like something that could go either way. After a moment, she said, I heard you're doing the Midtown project. It's been in the local news. That's why I'm here, yeah. Big deal. Hopefully. She nodded slowly. Her thumb moved around the rim of her water glass in small circles. George watched her hands, noticed the way they weren't quite still, and thought about what kind of day produces that kind of restlessness in a person. Are you okay? He asked. She looked at him. Not offended, not soft, just measuring. Why? Because you're sitting alone in a hotel bar drinking water at 10 at night and you look like you're holding something heavy. A long silence. Now outside the bar's entrance, a group of gala stragglers passed in a burst of laughter and champagne glasses, and Evelyn watched them go with an expression he couldn't fully read. I got asked to leave my sister's house today, she said. Flat, matter of fact. Like she'd already spent the emotional energy on it and was now just reporting the facts. I've been staying there for 4 months, since I lost my job. She said she and her husband needed their space back. George said nothing. She gave me a garbage bag for my stuff. Evelyn's mouth pulled at the corner. Not quite a smile. Something more complicated. She was very organized about it. Had it sitting on the porch before I even woke up. Where are your things now? Car. She nodded towards somewhere beyond the wall. I've been driving around most of the day. And it ended up here because the bar was quiet and they didn't ask me to order anything expensive. George looked at her. Really looked, the way you rarely do with people, at the exhaustion she was carrying so upright, at the dignity she was holding on to with both hands even when it would have been easier to let it go. Tell me what happened, he said. Not just today. All of it, if you want to. She studied him for a long moment. Then something in her seemed to make a decision. You got time? All night, he said. Evelyn Hook had not planned on her life looking like this at 30. She told him the way people tell hard stories when they've stopped performing them, straight and unembellished, looking mostly at the bar top rather than at him. After high school, she'd gotten a partial scholarship to study communications at a state school in Tempe. She'd worked 2 jobs to cover the rest. Graduated. Got a position at a mid-sized marketing firm in Phoenix. Nothing glamorous but solid. The kind of job that felt like the beginning of something rather than the thing itself. For a while it was fine. Better than fine. She had a small apartment, a car that ran, a plan for the next 3 years that she kept in a notebook with bullet points and honest timelines. She was good at her job. Her boss told her so. Her colleagues told her so. She told herself so every morning, which was the only version that fully counted. Then the firm lost 2 major clients in the same quarter. Restructuring followed. Her entire department was dissolved in a single afternoon meeting that lasted 11 minutes. Because she walked out with a cardboard box and a severance check that covered 6 weeks if she was careful. She was careful. It ran out anyway. She applied for other positions. Interviewed well, she thought. Got to final rounds twice and didn't get either role. The reasons given were vague in the way rejection reasons always are. The kind of language designed to close a door without letting you see what's on the other side of it. Savings went. Then the apartment. Her sister had offered the spare room with conditions that weren't fully stated at the time, which Evelyn had understood but chosen to believe were generous rather than transactional. That had been her mistake, she said, believing that family meant the same thing to everyone. I don't think I'm a failure, she said quietly, when she'd finished. I know that probably sounds like something a failure would say, But I made reasonable choices. I worked hard. Things just... She paused, searching for the right word. Cascaded. It doesn't sound like something a failure would say, George said. It sounds like someone describing bad luck and a system that doesn't leave much margin for it. She looked at him. Is that the billionaire's take on poverty? That's the take of someone who grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with a single mother who worked nights, he said. And who knows exactly how thin the margin is and how fast things cascade when it goes. Something shifted in her face. The guardedness didn't disappear entirely, but it loosened. I forgot about that, she said softly. I forgot you grew up. I mean, I remember you were poor, he said simply. You can say it. What we both were. She nodded slowly. You used to come in without lunch. You used to share yours without making it a thing, he said. I never forgot that. You have no idea how much that matters to a kid when it happens without pity attached to it. Evelyn looked away. Her jaw tightened briefly, the way people's jaws do when they're deciding not to cry in front of someone. That was a long time ago, she said. Yeah, he agreed, but here we are anyway. They talked for another hour, not about his money or her lack of it, about Mrs. Calloway's class and the book reports they used to dread, about the neighborhood they grew up in and which parts of it still existed and which had been replaced by condominiums, about small specific things that only two people who shared a particular chapter of life could possibly remember, the broken water fountain by the gymnasium, the science teacher who wore the same sweater every Friday, the time Evelyn had organized a petition to get better books in the school library and actually succeeded. George had forgotten about the library petition. When she mentioned it, he felt something click into place. That worked, he said. You actually got them to order new books. 43 signatures, she said. And for the first time that evening, she smiled with her whole face. I was very persuasive at 13. You were relentless at 13, he said, in the best possible way. The smile stayed for a moment, then softened into something more reflective. I used to think that was going to take me somewhere, she said. That thing, whatever it is, and the thing that makes you believe a problem can be fixed if you just find the right approach. It did take you somewhere. It took me to a hotel bar with a garbage bag in my car. It took you through a scholarship, 2 jobs, a career, and 6 months of not giving up when most people would have. He said it evenly, without decoration. That's not nothing, Evelyn. She was quiet for a moment. What do you want me to say to that, George? Nothing, he said. I just want you to hear it. The bar had emptied out around them without either of them noticing. The bartender was wiping down the far end, pointedly unbothered. Somewhere in the hotel, a door closed, and then it was very quiet. George turned his club soda glass in a slow circle. He'd been thinking about it for the past 30 minutes, turning it over carefully, the way he turned over any significant decision, looking at it from different angles, checking his own motivations, making sure what he was about to say was coming from the right place rather than the wrong one. I want to ask you something, he said. She looked at him. And I need you to hear it the way I mean it, not the way it might sound on the surface. Okay, she said carefully. He turned to face her. Come with me. A beat of silence. To Denver, he continued. I have a communications and community engagement division that has needed a proper director for 8 months. My current team lead is excellent at execution, but she'll tell you herself she's not a visionary. We need someone who can look at a project, a development, a community space, a public-facing initiative, and understand how to tell its story in a way that actually reaches people. He paused. Someone who at 13 knew how to get 43 signatures for a library. Evelyn stared at him. I'm not doing this because I feel sorry for you, he said. I want to be completely clear about that. I'm doing this because I sat here for an hour and remembered who you are and realized that whoever is currently not hiring you is making a significant mistake. And I have spent 20 years building something specifically so I could make decisions that correct significant mistakes when I see them. She hadn't moved. The role is real, he said. The salary is fair. More than fair. There's relocation support. It's not a favor dressed up as a job. It's a job that needs the right person, and you are the right person. Evelyn looked down at the bar top. Her hands had gone still. "You don't know if I'm good at what I do," she said finally. Her voice was steady but careful. "I know you're smart. I know you're principled. I know you don't quit. I know you treat people without pity attached to it." He paused. "I can teach skills. I can't teach any of those things." A long silence stretched between them. George didn't fill it. He'd learned that the most important thing you could do after saying something true was to let it breathe. "I'd have to think about it," she said. "Of course. I'd need to know it was real. Like actually real. Not a kindness dressed up as an opportunity. I'll have my chief of staff send you the job description tonight. You can look up the salary band publicly. It's benchmarked to industry standard. You'd interview properly with the team. I won't override the process." She looked at him then. Really looked, the same way he'd looked at her an hour ago. "Why?" she asked. "Genuinely. Why does this matter to you?" George considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Because you fed me lunch when you didn't have to," he said. "And because I've spent 20 years watching what happens when capable people don't get the margin they need. And because I can do something about it tonight, and I've learned that when you can do something and you don't, that stays with you." Evelyn Hook looked at the bar top for a long moment. Then she said, okay. She drove to Denver 4 weeks later with her car packed and a start date confirmed, and a lease signed on a small apartment near the office that George's relocation team had helped her find, but that she'd chosen herself, which she'd been clear was important to her. She interviewed with the team the week before she started. George had kept his word about the process. She met with 4 people over 2 days, asked hard questions, got honest answers, came back with a counter on one element of the compensation structure that his chief of staff called George about with barely concealed approval. "She negotiated," he said. "Good," George replied. She started on a Monday in November. By Wednesday, her team lead had emailed George to say that Evelyn had already identified a narrative gap in their current community outreach strategy for the Riverside development and proposed a framework to address it. He read the email twice. Then he smiled and went back to work. 8 months later, George was walking through the lobby of his Denver office on the way to a site visit when he passed the communication suite and heard Evelyn's voice through the open door, clear and unhurried, walking a junior team member through a presentation structure. "The story isn't about the building," she was saying. "The building is just the setting. The story is about the people who are going to live their lives inside it. That's what you lead with. That's what makes someone care." George slowed his walk just slightly. He thought about a 13-year-old with 43 signatures for a library, about a woman in a thin jacket sitting very still at a bar, holding her dignity carefully with both hands, about how much had almost been lost to a garbage bag on a porch on an ordinary Tuesday morning. He didn't stop walking. She didn't need him to. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was always capable of doing, in a room that finally had enough space for it. Some things don't need a dramatic ending. Sometimes the most powerful moment is just someone finally being seen. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who's been carrying something heavy lately. Sometimes the right words at the right moment are the only thing standing between a person and giving up. Heck, and if you're the one carrying it right now, don't quit. Someone who sees you clearly might be closer than you think.